Welcome to the Dingir-Zone. Hi, I'm Victor, and today I want to look into the question, who invented God? I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any gods, but obviously many people have at least some ideas of gods in their heads. So they have a concept of a plan or a concept of God in their heads. And I'm interested in the question, where does this concept come from? So in other words, who invented God? First things first, which God are we talking about? I mean, there are thousands of gods in human history, but I'm going to look at the God of the Bible. You may think that his name is Jehovah or Yahweh, and that's actually not his name. In the Bible you only find the letters JHWH, or in Hebrew letters JHWH. And in ancient times people were not allowed to pronounce that name. And because of that, over time, the memory was lost how to pronounce that. So how do you say this name? And Jehovah or Yahweh are just educated guesses about how you would pronounce that. So this is the God that we are talking about. And where does that God come from? Well, obviously you would look at Israel, Jerusalem, you would look at archaeological findings, and the oldest archaeological finding about this name is the Mesha stele, also known as Moabite stone, which is from the Moabites, a neighboring people, which mention Yahweh, the God of Israel. And this stele is dated to 840 BCE. Okay, this is the oldest reference to that name that we have. Many people desperately try to make this whole God older than that. With this cursed tablet that was allegedly found, or the so-called Israel stele from Egypt, doesn't contain the name Israel. It contains the letters JSJR. Yisrael is not Israel. And historians believe that this more likely refers to the valley of Jezreel. Whatever. Now 840 BCE is a very interesting date for this stele, because just 1 year earlier, in 841 BCE, the dynasty of the Omrides was overthrown. They were the rulers of Samaria, and you even find that in the Bible. In 2 Kings 9, you have this story where Elisha, the prophet, teams up with Arameans and a guy named Jehu, and they overthrow the Omrides, and of course the Omrides were very evil people. They worshipped Baal, like everyone I don't like worships Baal in the Bible. And the Queen Jezebel is thrown out of a tower, and I think horses trample her and dogs eat her remains, and nothing remains of her, and stuff like that. And they shoot the son of the king with an arrow and stuff. And ultimately Jehu becomes new king. That's in the Bible. And that's interesting, isn't it? That here this new king Jehu gets in power, and only 1 year later we have the oldest reference to Yahweh in history. So I think it's pretty obvious that this King Jehu brought the worshipping of Yahweh about. Then the question becomes, where did Jehu get this idea of this god? A lot of people will just point to the main god of the Canaanites, El, and will just say, well, Yahweh is just renamed El, the main god of the Canaanites, and that is actually supported by Exodus 6:3, where it says, I appeared to Abram, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name Yahweh I did not make myself fully known to them. And okay, this is a bad translation. In the Hebrew, it says here El Shaddai, so El Almighty. Okay, so it says here clearly, I, Yahweh, am the God that your fathers called El, right? And that's pretty solid to say that God was El before, but I think that's too simplistic. There's a lot more to say about this question than just say, hey, it was El. Because what about the other gods of the pantheon of the Canaanites? Where did they go? Just saying Yahweh is El, doesn't answer that question. And I think we can do better than that. So let's look at the question from the other side of the timeline and look back where the people came from. Here on this channel GeoNomad, they have some really good infos about how humans migrated over time, and this here is an interesting point where let me make this bigger. You see that obviously everything came from South Africa, right? And people migrated over here and then over here, and from this IJK here they migrated here to I and J. And that's a really interesting region we have here. That's the Caucasus. And that's a really interesting, important region. And this here happened, I think, around 60,000 years ago, that people colonized the Caucasus region here. Now, let's look closer at this Caucasus region. In the Caucasus region, we had a kingdom named Urartu. Now, Urartu is very interesting because, for one reason, in this region is a mountain that we today call Ararat. And if you have heard that name before, that was probably in Genesis 8:4. Mount Ararat is where Noah's Ark supposedly landed. But even more interesting than that is that the name Urartu, written in Hebrew, is spelled exactly, really 100% exactly the same as Ararat. So when the Bible talks about Mount Ararat, it doesn't necessarily refer to the mountain that we today call Ararat. It could refer to any mountain in Urartu. Me personally, I think Mount Nemrut here at the shores of Lake Van, the center of Urartu, and where one of its capitals, Tushpa, was located, is a volcano. And yeah, the thing is, this book here, Warum der Teufel nach Schwefel riecht, die vulkanische Heimat der Hölle. That's a book that I found quite randomly, but it's very interesting, and it's written by a geologist named Ilham Gajimuradov. You will also find publications by him about this, so scientific publications about this topic of connecting religion to this volcanic eruption, linking religion to this volcano Nemrut here at the shore of Lake Van. So yeah, quite possibly Noah's Ark landed here on this volcano Mount Nemrut. So whatever, that's not the point here. The point is that as Gajimuradov tells us, is that around 6,500 BCE, so around 8,500 years ago, this volcano erupted. And at that time, you actually find a lot of dispersion of people from the Caucasus region spreading everywhere in the world. For example, they went to the north, and also to Greece, and here to the Middle East, and that is actually the reason why all these mythologies are so similar. You know, the Norse mythology, the Middle Eastern mythology, Greek mythology, Indian mythology, Roman mythology also, but they took it from Greece. So yeah, but the thing that I want to really point out are the people called the Hurrians, or in the Bible they are named Horites. And these people lived at Lake Van at the time when Mount Nemrut erupted. And I think there was even DNA evidence showing that the people, these Hurrians, fled from this volcanic eruption from Lake Van here down to the region around Nimrod, or Nimrut. But really the thing that I want to point out, these Hurrians are really interesting people. I personally think they are the ancestors of the people who later wrote the Bible. Again, they moved down here to the region of today's Mosul, and yeah, these Hurrians, this is a Hurrian mythology, is the song of Ulikumi, and that's a really interesting thing, because if you've heard of the Chaos Kampf on Krakenford's channel, he has a lot of videos about this Chaos Kampf mythology. You have Chaos Kampf mythology in all the mythologies around the globe. You have, for example, in Norse mythology, you have the battle between Thor and Jörmungandr. In Greece, you have Zeus battling Typhon. In Canaanite mythology, you have Baal fighting Yam, later named Yavu. Wink, wink. In Egyptian mythology, you have Ra fighting Apophis. You have Marduk fighting Tiamat in Babylonian mythology. In Sumerian mythology, you have Ninurta fighting Arzak. or was it Anzu? Whatever. In Indian mythology, you have Indra fighting Vritra. Did I leave any mythology out? Yeah, and this mythology, called Chaoskampf, goes back to this Song of Ulikumi. Song of Ulikumi is the oldest instance of this Chaoskampf mythology. And the interesting part here is that this instance of the Chaoskampf, the oldest one that we have, quite clearly talks about a volcanic eruption. So Ulikumi is a stone demon who is born of a mountain goddess, yeah, he rises to the heavens and attacks the sky gods, but then the storm god Teshub defeats him. And yeah, I personally, and they also say that, I personally think that this is actually the origin of the whole Satan story, right? Satan attacking God and then being thrown into the underworld. Ulikumi is also thrown back into the volcano and into the underworld, and that's also what happens in the other stories, right? In many of these stories, you have this evil creature being captured under a volcano and being put in chains, and but with a prophecy that when the world ends, then it will free itself and devour the world, and some Messiah is going to step up and defeat it and create a new perfect world. And this story of a volcanic eruption at Mount Nemrut is the oldest instance of that. And yeah, there must have been cultural connections between them and everyone else. And as I said, people dispersed all over the globe from there, so that totally makes sense that yeah, this story would end up everywhere. They went down here to a region called Samara now, and in that region there have been archaeological findings of old pottery and stuff. And the thing is that this Samara culture is relatively similar to the Ubaid culture. And now this becomes interesting because the Ubaid culture is what you find in Sumer, especially so here near the Persian Gulf, especially the region of Uruk, Ur, and Eridu, which are the three oldest cities ever, the first cities that have ever been built. These people, the Sumerians, may have come from the Hurrians. Not necessarily, it's not really necessary for my argument to work, but plausibly the Hurrians are the ancestors of the Sumerians. But that's not scientific consensus, that's just based on the similarity between Samara culture and Ubaid culture. And yeah, this is really relevant that we have these cities Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. Uruk is, by the way, the city where writing was invented. But the city Ur, also in this region, is very interesting in the context of the God of the Bible, because it says here that Abraham, the founding father of Israel, came from Ur, exactly this city, Ur of the Chaldees. And another interesting detail. Chaldee, there are actually two regions called Chaldee, and one of them is here where Ur is located, but the other one is Urartu. So, or at least somewhere in Urartu. I don't remember exactly, but the thing is, quite plausibly, the people coming from here, went to Sumer, founded the cities, and named the region after the region where they came from, Chaldee. Maybe, but not scientific consensus. It just makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, the Hurrians, by the way, renamed themselves to Mitanni. I think they merged with some other cultures, and they were actually still around that region here. Yeah, they were Hurrian speaking. Again, as I said, they came from the Hurrians. What happens then? Well, Abraham leaves Ur, founds Babylon, and then moves to Haran. So Haran is a city in southeastern of today's Turkey here. And Haran is really interesting for this question because, again, Abraham supposedly lived there for a long time. But the thing is this, we have Yahweh in Israel in 840 BCE, right? And the question is, where was Yahweh before that, the concept of Yahweh? Many people want this concept to come from the south. Here in Edom, they want to look for him. Others say that he came from the north. I think the Phoenicians, some people say the Omrites brought Yahweh, but that doesn't make so much sense to me. Queen Jezebel was a Phoenician princess, if I remember correctly. And they say that Yahweh was brought there by Jezebel, but that really doesn't make sense to me when you consider how negatively the Bible depicts the Omrites. That really doesn't make sense to me. But the question really is, did God come from the north or from the south? Again, many people want to argue for the south because that's what the Bible says, right? Moses came from Egypt, right? And they desperately want this to be accurate history, but even if it came from the south, from Egypt, then before that, Abraham was still in the north, in Haran, right? So either way, God would come from the north. But let's put that aside for now. We'll come back to it a bit later. Let's talk about Haran again. Haran was a main center of worshipping for the moon god called Sin or Suin, and the Sumerians called him Nana. Again, Haran was one of the main cult centers for this god. And interestingly enough, in Haran they used some stone for this worshipping. I'm guessing this may be a meteorite or something which people thought came from the moon, was part of the moon, maybe. And so maybe that's why they worship this stone. But let's not forget, the stone is in Haran, Abraham is in Haran, and today we have this Abraham's stone as part of the Kaaba in Islam, in Mecca. So I think it's quite plausible that this Abraham's stone in Mecca actually is that stone from Haran. I don't know, but it would make a lot of sense to me. But anyways, let's talk about this moon god. The thing about this god is that before the Bronze Age collapse, this god was super popular. Like, this was the #1 god of all the gods in the pantheon. He was considered above all the other gods that had been even main gods like Enlil or Enki in earlier times. So it would make total sense to me that all the other gods would have been syncretized with Sin. So the stories of other gods would be incorporated to Sin's stories, and the other gods just erased, right? And that makes a lot of sense, because when you syncretize Sin with Enlil, then, well, Sin becomes creator of the world and ruler of the universe, who flooded the entire planet trying to kill all humans. And when you also syncretize Enki into the mix, then you have a god who saved one family from this global flood. You have the god that confounded the languages. You have the god that created humans out of clay. We can talk about Sumerian mythology all day long and find parallels to the Bible, but if you would syncretize Sin with all the other gods, then you would get a lot of the stories that you find in the Bible, including Yahweh killing Rahab, which is probably a leftover from the Chaos Kampf in the Bible. Anyways, the point is that, in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense that we have this super popular god Sin, right? Who becomes like the super god, who has all these stories of floods and confounding languages and creating humans, creating the earth, right? All this in this one god, right? And then the Bronze Age collapse happens, and after the Bronze Age collapse we have a completely different god who has been unheard of before, right? That doesn't make sense to me, that a super popular god would just disappear and then a different god with pretty much the same attributes comes out of nowhere and is super popular. It just doesn't make sense to me. So what I think is that basically just Suen has just been renamed to Jehovah within the time of the Bronze Age collapse. And I will tell you how I think that happened. I mean, many people have some ideas where that name Jehovah, Yahweh, comes from. But I've never seen any really convincing argument for any of these hypotheses. I think the timeline that I'm going to show you makes a lot of sense. So before the Bronze Age collapse, there were the so-called Hyksos. The Hyksos were a coalition of people which probably consisted of Mitanni, so Hurrians, and also I think Amorites. I think they weren't called Amorites anymore. They may have been called Suteans or already Aramaeans. That's not really clear it's quite probable that the Aramaeans, who conquered Canaan in 841 BCE, remember, so there was a coalition of these people forming here in Syria near Mount Zephon, which is up here, the holy mountain of Baal. And yeah, this coalition then went to Egypt and conquered Egypt between 1650 and 1550 BCE. They conquered Egypt, ruled it for about 100 years, and then were driven out. This fits pretty well with the Exodus story, right? And most historians agree that this is probably part of the Exodus story. So the Exodus story was probably cobbled together from multiple stories, and the story of the Hyksos being one of them, right? They went to Egypt, they ruled Egypt, just like Joseph does in Exodus, not Exodus, late in the Genesis. Yeah, then later they leave, and they are chased by Pharaoh Ahmose. Sounds a lot like Exodus, but there are big differences to Exodus. For one, they didn't want to leave; they were chased out. They weren't slaves; they were rulers. But the thing that I really want to point out here is these Hyksos, who came from the region of Haran, so Syria, that region, they went to Egypt and ruled for 100 years there. And these Hyksos, they adapted to the Egyptian culture. So they would call themselves pharaohs. They would use imagery like scarabei. The point is they adapted their culture to the Egyptian culture. And let's say these people coming from a region where sin was worshipped, right? They go to Egypt, and now they have to talk with Egyptians and tell them, hey, our God is so great, right? So they would look at the Egyptian pantheon and look for a God that corresponds to sin, so that they could then say, hey, your God, whatever, that's our God Sin, and he is actually the best, right? That's what they would do, right? And if they looked at this Egyptian pantheon, what would they look for? Well, again, Sin is a moon god, but more important than that is that Sin is an underworld god who is a judge in the underworld. Okay, and if you look into the Egyptian pantheon, there you will find a god Thoth, or Tot, or I don't know how to pronounce it, who is an underworld god and an underworld judge. Okay, and the really, really, really big thing I want to point out here is that this god is also called Jehuti. And Jehuti fits quite well with the Tetragrammaton. T. It's not this hey over here, not exactly, but yeah, I think it makes sense that the Hyksos would have called Sin Jehuti while they were in Egypt, right? And then they were chased out of Egypt, and King Ahmose allegedly killed them all, but quite probably some of them survived. They may have run away, whatever, and that might actually put them here in this region in southern Israel, Edom. Some of them may even have been taken as slaves and used down here in the Timna Desert in a copper mine in Slaves Hill in Timna, because that's actually an interesting point here, because near this Slaves Hill remains have been found that may be remains of the tabernacle, the first tent shrine to Yahweh that is described in the book of Exodus. But whatever, that's not really important here. Okay, so either way, the Hyksos may have died. They may have, some of them may have survived. I don't think that would be enough for them to conquer the region here. I think that while they were ruling Egypt, they just still had contact to their homeland, and probably already told them, hey, our god Sin is now called Jehudi, and I think then that naming just persisted here. And when the people from that region, the Aramaeans, then conquered Canaan in 841 BCE, that's where this name Jehudi or Yahweh then appears in history. Okay, I think before that, in a city called Ugarit, which was a cultural center at the time, the Ugaritic Baal cycle also has a hint at that. In this Ugaritic Baal cycle, which is from, I think, 1300, around the time of 1300 BCE, has a story where the sea god is renamed from Yam to Yavu. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that reflects that that Sin, Jehudi, went back from the north to the south, back to the north, and was syncretized with all the other gods. So here he now gets syncretized with the sea god Yam, because in their pantheon, Yam is a judge. So at this point, maybe this whole judge motif was just more important for the god. So then here they would have identified the sea god with Yahweh. And I want to point out another thing that, in my opinion, really speaks for the identification of Jehudi with Jehovah, and that is in many places in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you have expressions like this: "We are called by thy name." Here in Jeremiah 14:9, for example, or in Daniel 9:19. Thy city and thy people are called by thy name, or Isaiah 43:7. Everyone that is called by my name, yada yada yada. So this talks about the Jewish people carrying the name of God. Now, what is the Hebrew word for the Jews? It's Jehudim. So the people that are named after God carry a name Jehudim, and this em suffix is just plural, so they are the Jehudis, right? So if we use an S for plural, so yeah, the people of Jehudi, right? This I think this is a really good indication as to how you should pronounce the name JHWH. Right? Jehovah and Yahweh are just wrong. I think it's really Jehudi. A few other indications, in my opinion, is that the whole belief in the God of the Bible comes from the north, in the Syrian region here. When you look at some stories from here, from this region, you also find similarities to the Bible. Like you have King Zimri-Lim, and that's really an interesting name, Zimri-Lim, because in the Bible you have a King Zimri. Okay, as one of the many people in the lineage, you have a King Zimri, and this King Zimri worshipped the moon god Sin. Okay, he was a very powerful king who conquered a lot of land, and he had a very big, lavish palace with a very beautiful statue called the water-pouring goddess of Zimri-Lim, I think, or the water-pouring goddess of Mari. Really beautiful statue. But this whole story of Zimri-Lim reminds me of King David in many places. And his ancestor Yadun-Lim, the founder of the Lim dynasty, sounds a lot like Abraham, in my opinion. So that also makes sense. You have stories in Ugarit, Ugarit ruins up here. That was also a cultural center where you find a lot of mythological stories, among which, at least according, I've seen something on Myth Vision, where they talk about an older version of Genesis, where Abraham is bitten by a snake and loses immortality by that, and stuff like that. But so Ugarit is also up here, and Zimri-Lim and the Lim dynasty is up here. The Mitanni are up here. The Aramaeans who conquered Canaan in 841 BCE, they all came from up here. Okay, but I do think that the name has changed down here and then moved back up. There's also the Idrimi inscription, a statue of King Idrimi. 15th century BCE. And when you read that story of Idrimi, that also sounds a lot like Exodus. So I think this is another part that was mixed in with the Hyksos and some other stories to become the Exodus story, right? I've talked at length about how I think that the Babylonian Enuma Elish is also has also become part of the Exodus story. So Oh, and by the way, the Idrimi inscription contains the oldest reference to people called Habiru, who most historians agree are probably the people that are called Hebrews in the Bible. The Idrimi inscription actually says that Idrimi conquered Syria with the help of the Habiru, who at that time already lived in Canaan. Okay, and that is the Idrimi inscription is actually earlier than what the Bible timeline would say when the Exodus happened. Okay, so So even before the alleged Exodus, the Habiru were already in Canaan. Yeah. Interestingly enough, Idrimi, who is quite similar to Moses in his story, Idrimi doesn't worship God Jehudi, Yahweh. Actually, Idrimi worships Teshub. Remember who Teshub was? Teshub was the storm god who defeated Olikumi in this Hurrian story about the volcanic eruption. Right? That's kind of funny how the cycle closes there, and yeah, how the Hurrians from Lake Van became the Mitanni and worked together really in this coalition in the Hyksos, and they also made a peace treaty with King Idrimi after he conquered some of the region. So they were really influential still at the time, and again they are still named in the Bible as Horites. So yeah, these Hurrians are quite influential, especially through the Chaos Kampf, which has become a story in all major mythologies around the globe, right? So yeah, that's what I think, but I'm not a scientist. Again, I don't think there will ever be scientific consensus on this question. But yeah, write into the comments, what do you think? Do you think this is convincing? Do you think God Yahweh is just the god Thoth, Jehudi, or the moon god Nanasuin, renamed Jehudi, coming from Thoth? I think he is. But if you have good arguments against that, I'm open to hearing them. So write something in the comments, and if you like this video, like it, share it, subscribe, and see you next time.